You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hi, and welcome to today's therapy session. We're going to talk about our feelings regarding the 5th episode of Moon Knight. Now, I know that what we saw has probably brought up a lot of strong emotions and questionable trust issues. But let me assure you, this is a safe space. No one will judge you, not even JD. Now, who brought the donuts? Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Now, before we jump into our Moon Knight Episode 5 discussion, I wanted to point out some news from other MCU Disney Plus shows or movies. Tom Hiddleston is talking about the upcoming 2nd season of Loki, which is awesome. The actor told a site called The Playlist that the new season is in production with scripts and stories, and he expects they're actually going to start filming in around 6 weeks. Now, he doesn't go into any details, but he says that there's a lot of questions to be answered. Now, originally, Loki wasn't supposed to be another season. It was supposed to just be one and done. But when it got picked up for a 2nd season, they changed the ending, and suddenly we had the ambiguous Kang taking over the TVA ending. And now Hiddleston says that change actually excited him and made him just wanted to keep going. He didn't want to stop. He just wanted to just film the next episode. So he's really excited to get back to it. But he hasn't given any details and no word on who besides Hiddleston will be back for season 2. Will we get Owen Wilson? Will we get Sylvie? Don't know. So JD says he is absolutely judging. Well, JD, let's give you something to judge. Marvel dropped a 30-second clip from Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which hits theaters next week, like a week from today or tomorrow. So let's watch it real quick. It's a pretty interesting clip. So, all right, I have to talk over this to make sure we don't get hit. But that's New York. She's the newest character. And you can see her in the city of New York. What's being crushed. And the reveal of Gargantos. Now, if you look at that and go, who the hell's Gargantos and why isn't that Shuma Gorath? Well, it turns out Shuma Gorath is got a copyright problem with H.P. Lovecraft estate. So they borrowed Gargantos, which is a name from a Namor villain, an undersea creature. By the way, the cape there is becoming the MVP of anything it's in, isn't it? That cape is awesome. But all right, so we get the buzzsaw. I do want to stop talking just long enough to hear this sound. Oh, I love that. The sound mixing on this is awesome. The sound of the saw blade, even though it's mystical. All right, so that was the clip, and that looks great to me. The city looks great. It looks like we're a direct continuation of Spider-Man No Way Home. But I love that. I love the sound of that going through. I love the look of Gargantos. It looks like it's going to be awesome. Again, that drops in just a week from now. I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to get a chance to see it. It may not be until the Monday after, but either way, we should be able to talk about it the week after the movie debut. Yeah. You can't believe it's May already. Man, yeah. Sunday, May 1st. This year is flying by already. There was also a TV spot that got released, and we're not going to bother showing that. You can go look for it if you want. But there's 2 quick clips in it that give you a glimpse of characters we're pretty sure were going to be in it, but hadn't had confirmed. But there's a glimpse of Captain Carter. We don't see Haley Atwell's face, but we see her sliding across the ground, and that shield, is very prominent with the British Union Jack in the center. Also, we hear Patrick Stewart's voice, and we see the edge of it, or his arm, and the edge of a gold/yellow hover chair that looks like is completely inspired by the one that Professor X had in the 90s TV series. And if you now have that theme song in your head, you're welcome. There is one other, we get a little bit better look at the figure at the end that was it caused a lot of controversy because some people thought it looked like Tom Cruise done as Superior Iron Man, and other people like, no, that looks like maybe Captain Marvel, maybe played by Lashana Lynch, who was in the first Captain Marvel movie. Like maybe in some universe, she took Marvel out on the flight instead of Brie Larson's character. But we do get a better look, and I'm leaning more towards the Captain Marvel, like a variant Captain Marvel, than I am Superior Iron Man. But keep in mind that Marvel has used CGI in the past to make us think one thing and then switch it on us. Anybody remember the Endgame trailer where the Hulk is running into battle and we never get that in the movie? So keep that in mind, that we may be seeing this somewhat ambiguous figure that looks like it could be Captain Marvel because of they're trying to keep the Tom Cruise thing hidden, or it could not be Tom Cruise. We're getting reports both ways, back and forth. I guess we'll find out in a week. All right, let's see. How are we doing on time? Good. Oh, we're moving along here. We are going to jump into episode 5, The Asylum. And I'm going to do kind of a recap of it. And it's not going to be a recap in sequence because it's easier to kind of group it together in a cluster. And then we'll talk about some of the things that popped up, some of the names that were dropped. It's always Mephisto. It's always Mephisto. That's the answer constantly. It's Mephisto. But we're going to drop some of the names that were dropped. We're going to talk a bit about the Egyptian ritual for the dead, because that does play big into this episode. But before we do that, hey, JD, can we get a spoiler warning? Oh, and it says here that JD is 2 degrees away from Marvel actors. Friends of mine worked on Dear White People with Tiona Paris and Tessa Thompson. Let's see. How many degrees away would I be? I worked with Michael C. Hall. I'm sure he's worked with a Marvel person. I don't know. Have to figure that out later. Okay, so, Dear White People also has the girl who's going to play Ironheart in it. So, all right, The Asylum may have had the most emotional, heart-wrenching episode since WandaVision. Since the "What is grief but love persevering" line that we all went, oh. Well, that's kind of what we got here, too. Also, a lot of people talking about Boing Boing. I haven't seen it. It's an animated feature. Oh, I'm the name's slipping. But, the death of an animated or of a imaginary friend. They're saying that's his third, with Boing Boing being second, and Wilson from Castaway being first. So Wilson's was pretty traumatic. I'll give you that. All right. This episode continues, and we kind of start off with, we're in the asylum, or we get its actual name, the Putnam Psychiatric Hospital, which is the same name used in the comics that kind of inspired this, which was the Jeff Lemire, Greg Smallwood run. But we're jumping around a lot in this episode between Stephen and Mark talking to Taweret, the hippo goddess of fertility, that is taking them through the Duat, which is the Egyptian underworld, to be judged. And then we cut to Dr. Harrow, who in his office, as he addresses Mark and then Stephen and maybe somebody else. It really depends on how you look at it. But the cuts are quite jarring because it's like we're in one scene, then suddenly we're in another. And they do that a lot through this episode. It's kind of all over the place. But one of the moments that we see Mark with Harrow doesn't make... Inside Out, thank you. Bing Bong. Bing Bong from Inside Out. Voiced by Richard Kind. I did not know that. Richard Kind, of course, the living embodiment of the Penguin from the Batman. Or at least Colin Farrell's look. They just said make him look like Richard Kind. But a mean version of Richard Kind. All right, so there's a scene with Dr. Harrow in the office. And suddenly Mark has a busted up nose, a cut across his bridge. There's a bandage there. And this is the one where he fights back. He picks up the triangle-shaped object from the desk and tries to jam himself with it. They end up sedating him. But if you listen to his voice, and it happens a few other times in the series, he suddenly has almost a New York accent. We also get that in the scene where he's trying to find the tomb, the sarcophagus that's missing, right before Layla comes up, when he's talking to the guy in the bazaar. Again, he's got this kind of New York accent, which to me is the sign that that's Jake, that's that third persona they've been hinting at, but we haven't gotten, the one that was locked in the other sarcophagus that they never opened. So I think when we get done, we're going to get these moments that we're going to tie together, showing that Jake's been there all along. And I'll get more into that at the end. But we learned so much in this. Also in Dr. Harrow's office, there's a couple other important things besides Stephen calling him Ned Flanders, which was perfect. Such the look that he's got going there. But we get to see Harrow's diploma on the wall. And if you look closely at the diploma, and a lot of people, of course, still shot at it, got in and looked at it, there is no actual school name saying where Dr. Harrow got his degree from, nor is there a signature. And these are the kind of details that would be missing if that reality is fake. It's kind of like when you're in a dream and you try to focus on numbers or anything that would be factual details, they become very elusive. Every once in a while, for some reason, when I dream, I'm trying to solve puzzles like a Sudoku. And as I'm trying to work them out, I realize I can't actually see what the numbers are. So I can't solve and that's kind of where I know, okay, I'm in a dream. So that's the type of thing that we get here, is that any diploma should have the name of the school, should have a signature from the dean or the president of the school, and those aren't on there. And Marvel is too conscientious. They pay too close attention to what they're doing to miss something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the category of, hey, that's a fake world. All that stuff with Harrow that is him just working through his stuff in his mind palace in a way. Now, we also get Toweret talking about how she'd never seen anyone pick that type of setting for their version of the afterlife, which tells us that everybody's version of the afterlife is specific to them. Now, does that mean that the God guiding you through is specific to you as well? And that just kind of gets a little strange there. But as she's talking and she's going through the cards, you get the feeling this is still new to her. Now, is it new because she just got the job? Is it new because she hasn't done it that much? Because let's be honest, there aren't a lot of people still worshiping Egyptian gods. So for them to, maybe there aren't that many times she gets called upon. But she's not the one that's supposed to be doing this job anyway. This is supposed to be Anubis doing the judging and the guiding. So now maybe she guides him to the judge, but everything I said, or I read up on, she's not supposed to be doing the judging. Now she does name drop some other things she's seen, including the ancestral plane. That is from Black Panther. That's where when they take the purple flower, and they take that stuff to become Black Panther, and they have the Vision Quest. The Vision Quest takes them to the ancestral plane where they get to see, their ancestors. Good name for it then, huh? Ancestors in the ancestral plane. Marvel's spot on there. But I think we saw where Anubis was in the last episode. Yes, I think that maybe Anubis has been given the little tiny statue treatment. And that while she hasn't had to do it often, Toweret has taken over Anubis's job because the Ennead made him a little statue. But we'll get more into that. That's kind of my theory section. But she pulls Mark, and a lot happens. They start looking through different windows, into doors, into different rooms, and seeing different memories and stuff. And at one point, Mark and Steven see one of them standing on a street corner in what looks to be an American city. It has the feel of an American city. At first, it looked like New York to me. We find out later it's Chicago. But what happens is that Mark knows what that moment is. Steven doesn't. He doesn't want to deal with it. So he's like, I don't believe any of this at this point. Well, I'm going to open this door over here and we'll be back in the main room and Crowley will be calling out bingo numbers. Now, what happens when he opens the door is interesting, but the important thing to take away from there, he calls out Crowley's name. We never get the name in anywhere else in the show. He's the mime. His name is in the credits, but he's never spoken to or talked to. So we've never gotten his name before. So yes, Steven goes and visits this guy, but Mark knows who he is, which I think is fascinating because we don't know what the connection is there. Maybe we'll find out. There's only one episode left. I don't know how much they're going to be able to jam pack into that last episode and how much is going to be just kind of, we'll get to it sometime. My fear is that some of the stuff is going to be, we'll get to it sometime. And report I heard just before the show, the finale is supposed to come in around 45 minutes, which would make it the shortest finale for any Disney Plus series. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know if that's 45 minutes before credits. Normally, they don't do it that way. Normally, they just tell you the length of it. And I don't know how much we can, trust the information. But that does seem like a very short run time for all that's left to do in this series. All right, we're ready for the first commercial break. Let's do that. And when we come back, we'll talk about what Mark found out when he pushed through the doors. We'll be right back.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. We are talking about Moon Knight episode 5, the penultimate episode of the series. And of course, everybody is now saying what we say after the penultimate episode of all the Marvel series. How the hell are they going to wrap this up in one issue? This needs to be 3 more issues. This needs to be a 3-hour ending. They'll get it done. They always do. I have faith. But it is what we say. All right. So Mark pushes through the door thinking he's going back into the main area, and instead they end up on a boat. I'm on a boat. And the boat, of course, is traveling across the Duat, the Sea of Sands, and they're on their way to be judged, and the scales are there, and you have and Tauret reaches in and pulls out the hearts of both Mark and Stephen, which is fascinating because you would think they would only have one heart because there's only one body, but there's 2 of them. So he puts both hearts up there and then weighs it against the feather of Mott. And the idea is if it's perfectly balanced or the hearts are lighter, you get to go on to the field of reeds. Welcome to heaven and eternity. And if your heart is heavier, that means you're a bastard and overboard you go. Paraphrase. Well, she puts the hearts there with the feather and just kind of keeps going like this. And she tells him, look, we don't have a lot of time. You need to go back in there and figure out what's going on and, balance the scales, or things aren't going to go well for you, because if they're not balanced by the time we get there, you go over the boat anyway. So they go back inside, and we start seeing some of Mark's past. And which is interesting because it still takes a while for Stephen to realize they're only seeing Mark's past. Or mainly Mark's past. We start off in a room, a cafeteria full of dead bodies, and this turns out to be all of the people that Mark has killed as Moon Knight in Khonshu's name. And I found that interesting because as a soldier and a mercenary, wouldn't he have people in there as well? But those were just the ones he killed as Moon Knight. Maybe he never killed anybody in the other persona, or in as a mercenary before the Khonshu thing, and maybe he has, and we'll get to that. But when he starts going through, he remembers all of them, which surprises Stephen because he looks at Mark as being this cold-blooded killer, and Mark's not. And I think that's the key to this, is Mark isn't a cold-blooded killer. Every one of those deaths meant something to him. He remembered, and he talked about how he'd wished that one of them would have turned around and killed him. You know, that doing this work for Khonshu was actually weighing on his soul. While they're in the room, Stephen sees this young boy, and I'm pretty sure everybody just assumed at that point, oh, it's a young Mark. Turns out it wasn't. It wasn't Mark. What we get is, Stephen tries to follow the kid. Mark wants to stop him, but Stephen gets into the door. The kid runs through before Mark, locks the door, and we are transported to Chicago in the past, and we realize the kid that we've seen is Randall, Mark's younger brother, who is drawing a picture at the time of a goldfish with one fin. See, this all comes together. All these pieces connect together. Well, they're outside waiting for a barbecue. The mom's barbecuing. The dad is building a tree house or a shed or something. And Mark and Randall decide they're going to go play in the cave, which my dad's from Chicago. I've never been there. Well, I've been there to visit, but I've never been there for any length of time and lived. Are there caves like behind houses in the middle of Chicago? Is that a normal thing, especially caves that fill up when it rains and kills people? Because you would think killer caves in a city in the United States would be talked about more. Anyway, they go play in this cave. It starts to rain. They get trapped in there. Mark gets out. Randall drowns. And this is what leads to Mark and what happens to him. This is the path to his DID, his dissociative identity disorder. Now, when he dies, we then jump ahead to the Shiva. Basically, Mark is Jewish. Mark's dad is Jewish, and they sit Shiva, which is the grieving process. It's like a wake, but different. I don't want to get too much into it because I don't know that much about the Jewish culture. I don't want to insult anybody, but they're sitting Shiva, and Mark comes down the stairs, and his mom is furious at him for being there and blames him, says, "You're the reason he's dead." And from there, we watch as she gets more and more abusive towards him. And she just falls apart, basically drinking. And his father doesn't really do a lot to get in, to step in. He tries to take care of Mark in the sense of, we're still having the birthdays. He's still, but he doesn't. I mean, Wendy obviously needed help, needed to be out of the house because of the abuse towards Mark. He needed to stop the abuse. I mean, there was a lot going on there, but we don't really see at that point the specific abuse. We just see her verbally abusive to him. But so we're jumping through that, and then when it gets close to the time to see it, A quick Google search suggests that there are, in fact, a lot of cave systems around the Chicago area. All right. So killer rain caves do exist. So be careful, those of you in Chicago. Well, we also see that he leaves home. He can't handle being around his mother. And he leaves home and joins the army. We also find out that while in the army, he went AWOL during a fugue state, which ended up getting him discharged, which is where he became a mercenary, and he hooked up with his former CO, Bushman. Now, Bushman is a huge character in Moon Knight's history. Actually, so's Randall, but I'm going to cover them in a little bit. But we jump ahead to the scene in the desert at the tomb where Layla's father was killed. We see that Bushman killed him. We don't see who killed him, but he's dead. We see Mark is wounded, mortally wounded, and he's crawling along the sands and ends up going into the tomb that he had found. And basically what happened was Bushman decided he could make more money. Oh, and yeah, we do see this scarlet scarab scarf on her dad, yes. But he goes into Bushman wanted to sell the stuff from the tomb for himself. So since they had discovered it, he wants to kill Layla's father, take over. And Mark steps in, gets shot. He's about to die. He knows he's dying. He's actually going to end his own life. Instead of dying slowly, he's just going to take it. And that's when we hear Khonshu basically says you're mentally broken, but you could be you are a worthy choice to serve me. I will save you if you choose to, basically dole out Khonshu's justice and protect the travelers of the night. And of course, Mark, having no other choice and about to die, accepts, and we see him transform into Moon Knight for the first time. And it's a really cool looking transformation. Now, as all this is happening, we get closer to Judgment Time. Tauret notices that there's suddenly a bunch of souls falling from the sky, going directly into the sand and not actually getting judgment. They're just being dropped in, which should tell us that Harrow has freed Amit, that she's just sending, choosing the bad people and killing them off. Now, Mark's scales are still moving, so whatever they've seen so far hasn't done it. And Stephen ends up pushing him and ending up back to the bedroom. When we see his bedroom, there's so many things in it that explain who he is now. There's Chicago Cub pennant. The drawing that Randall had done of the one finned goldfish is now framed on the wall. There's the Tomb Busters poster. There's Dr. Stephen Grant and his buddy, their action figures. Oh, and when Mark and Randall went to the caves, they were pretending to be Dr. Stephen Grant and his assistant. So while he's sitting in his room and you're seeing all this stuff, and again, it looks like it's straight out of a Greg Smallwood drawing from the comics. All the little things that are supposed to be there are there, all the little symbols. But the mom starts pounding on the door, and Mark knows what's coming, and he basically runs. He hides away in this new persona, this Stephen Grant persona. And Stephen Grant, of course, is his hero, so that's why he becomes Stephen Grant. That's why he's got that accent, which is what the actor has in the movie. There's even talk about Mark trying to do the accent when he's with Randall, and it's not that good, which explains why Stephen's accent isn't that good. Because when he made him up. And so Stephen becomes this safe space where he could deny what his mother is doing to him. And what Wendy does is she comes in, she takes a belt off the wall, and then we cut away, but we hear her basically beating Mark. Yeah, and this is the real tough, one of the tough moments in it, but this is the start of his DID. And if you know anything about DID, you know that there's usually an abusive trauma at a young age, like 7, 8, 9 years old, that causes it. And this was the impetus for that. Now, the pain from that made him shift. Well, so they're just about out of time. And they go back out on the boat, and there's still, it's not moving as much, but it's not quite there yet. There's still something missing. And they're out of time. And the people that Mark has killed start climbing up out of the boat. And I don't know if they're made from sand or whatever, but they start attacking. And Mark tries to fight them off, but gets overwhelmed. Stephen, who originally hides, decides that he should be able to do what Mark can do. He steps in and starts fighting. He grabs a bat or something, starts hitting people. And he basically rescues Mark. But while it happens, he gets pulled overboard into the sands. And Mark is devastated because as the boat is continuing on, he's yelling, "Stop the boat, Stephen!" And Stephen is trying to move through the sand, and he's getting slower and slower until eventually he turns into sand. And he's just left reaching his arm out, which is the same pose Crawley was in the first episode. Now, this sacrifice by Stephen, or is the accepting that Stephen's gone, is what balances the scales. I skipped a part here that I need to go back for. But at one point, Mark tells Stephen that, yes, our mother is dead. And Stephen doesn't accept that she's dead. And what happens is we finally get to the point where it's on the street corner and we learn that Wendy has died. Mark went back home but couldn't go inside. And he's so devastated by her death that he breaks down again. And this is only a couple weeks before the series starts. And in doing so, his breaking down, he shifts back into Stephen. And suddenly Stephen is on the phone with his mother going, I've done it again. I don't know where I am. I'm completely lost. Do any of these street names sound familiar to you? And of course, he's in Chicago, not London. So, but Stephen doesn't accept that his mother is dead. Actually punches Mark, forces himself back into control in Harrow's office. And Harrow actually gets him to accept that his mother's dead too by calling her on the phone and holding the phone out to Stephen to talk to her. And Stephen finally accepts, no, she's actually dead. Now, with Stephen falling off the boat and being lost, it balances the scale. Mark is finally whole. And even though he's devastated by the loss of Stephen, suddenly he finds himself standing in the field of reeds. He's made it to eternity or heaven. And that's where the episode ends. There's no post-credit scene, nothing else. Stephen is gone. Mark is in the afterlife, is in heaven, basically, is in the field of reeds. And that's where they leave the episode. Now, at one point, they asked Toweret to get a message to Layla to try to get Khonshu out because Toweret couldn't resurrect him and have him try to stop Amit because he'd still be in a body full of bullet holes. So something else had to happen. He would need the power of Khonshu to heal. And so Khonshu had to be saved. So still a lot going on. Yeah, this was a hugely emotional episode. Now, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, I got some deeper dives into a couple areas we'll cover real quick, my theory, and then we'll wrap it up. So we'll be right back.
Did you know that every experience show, including some exclusive content, streams on Twitch? Check it out, twitch.tv/the_EXP. Or just scan that QR code.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rockin' Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula. You want the comics? You buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are talking about the Moon Knight, and I got some basic information to drop for you. We're going to tell the Egyptian afterlife. It's really interesting that Mark and Stephen are traveling on a boat, because how you travel in the underworld, or the Duat, is a major part of your status in Egyptian culture, and a boat passage was strictly reserved for pharaohs. This was to mimic the sun god Ra, who is believed to travel by boat to the underworld every night. That's the setting sun. Now, normally people travel through in coffins, and your coffin is kind of made up to represent who you are, to help you to obtain entry into eternity. But for them to be on a boat shows that their status is a little higher than it should be. Now, that might be because they're avatars of a god, but they really don't get into that. It should have just been, a coffin. Now, the interesting thing is that there are ways to prevent people from traveling, and that would be chopping their head off. So if you decapitate a corpse, it's guaranteed they will not get into the field of reeds, because they can't. That's the way to show that they're not good people. This is usually what kings or pharaohs did when somebody rebelled against them. Now, once in the afterlife, the deceased would be taken to the Hall of Mot and have their purity tested. And the first thing they would have to do is address all 42 assessors of Mot by name and recite the sins they didn't commit. So if you're a good person, that could take a while. If you're a bad person, it might be a short thing. Well, I didn't have sex with a goat. We good? Now, if you pass that, then you get your heart weighed against the feather of Mot. Now, this is usually done by Anubis, and that's why his head is on the scale. Now, if the heart is balanced, you get the information is then recorded by Thoth, and then the deceased is presented to Osiris, who takes them into the field of reeds, or what's actually known as Seketh Aru. And if the heart was heavier, then you get devoured by Ammit, and the soul of the deceased is permanently destroyed. Now, there are stories of rebirth and endless lives as part of Egyptian beliefs, and they're mentioned in passages of the Book of the Dead and some of the tomb scrolls. So gods can bring a person back to life. That may come into play very soon, because otherwise, because Mark is just hanging out in the field of reeds, is going to need a way to get back. Now, the reason why it seems Taurat isn't sure of what she's supposed to be doing could be because she's just a fill-in for Anubis, who, like we said earlier, may have gotten the tiny statue treatment, like a lot of the others that the Ennead is going after. It's interesting to me that one of the things they're doing in the series is they're name dropping a lot of Moon Knight villains. We had Anton Mogart earlier, who of course becomes Midnight Man. We get the name drop of Raoul Bushman, and of course Randall Spector, who was also known as the Hatchet Man or the Shadow Knight, depending on where he was in the story. But they make the main antagonist Arthur Harrow, who's a villain that appears in one comic. So this would make a lot of sense if they were going to do like an ongoing series, multiple seasons of Moon Knight, set them up. We'll bring Bushman in here. We'll bring Randall back, if he turns out not to be dead, that type of thing. But yeah, they just kind of blow through some of the biggest villains and focus on the one episode guy, who I always thought was going to be the Sun King, being another big villain. But now Raoul Bushman is an interesting character. He's kind of Moon Knight's archenemy. He was born in the small African nation of Burunda. He saw his family's land driven off of their land by European entrepreneurs. This left him angry and violent. He ended up becoming a mercenary and a terrorist for hire. Decided to get a face tattoo of a death head, along with having his teeth replaced with steel, which the whole thing is to strike fear in his enemies, which is a way more commitment. It's a bigger commitment to me than just wearing a bat costume, I just got to say. Now, he ends up meeting Frenchie Ducamp and Mark Spector while on a job in Cairo. They end up working together on multiple jobs. And eventually in Sudan, they come across Dr. Peter Alaroon, which is Marlene Alaroon's father. And they're kind of swapped in this for Layla and her dad. Dr. Alaroon discovers the tomb of Pharaoh Seti II. Bushman decides he wants to sell the artifacts to make money, goes to kill them. Mark interferes. He gets shot, dies at the foot of the statue of Khonshu. Khonshu brings him back. Boom, boom, boom. We got Moon Knight. So Bushman is a big part of Moon Knight's history. But he eventually feels like he's the reason Moon Knight got his power. So he goes after Moon Knight. At one point, he tries to destroy the statue of Khonshu, thinking that would take Moon Knight's power away. He enlists Midnight Man to help him on that. Bushman goes back to Burundi and stages a coup and takes over, and then uses the country and his resources to go after Mark a few more times. He even teams up at one point with the Sun King, or at other times with the Hood and Scarecrow, Baron Zemo, and Taskmaster. By the way, Marvel has a Scarecrow too, he's not Jonathan Cain, that's Batman, but they both have a Scarecrow. Now, another big villain for Moon Knight is Randall Spector, his brother. So yes, he's dead in this series, but in the comics, he grows up resenting his older brother, who always seems to be better at him than everything. They both join the service. They both become mercenaries. They work together until eventually Randall sees an opportunity to screw over his brother and going to sell out to the opposition on one of their assignments. And in doing so, he ends up having to kill this woman named, I don't have the name here, it's Lisa McCabe, I believe, who Mark is dating at the time. So he kills her, but before Lisa dies, she's able to tell Mark about Randall's betrayal. So Mark goes hunting after his brother, and after like 2 days and nights of hunting, tracks him down and lobs a grenade at him. This pretty much mangles Randall, leaves him in a hospital, and even though his body begins to heal, his mind is shattered. and he ends up becoming a serial killer. He starts hunting nurses through that's his thing. And then Mark ends up having to go after him when he goes after Marlene at one point. It's a whole big thing, and he becomes Hatchet Man. And this is a great run between with Bill Sienkiewicz art. But then it gets kind of retconned that maybe he wasn't the Hatchet Man, and Randall was saved for something else by the Rand Corporation, and he comes back as Shadow Knight, and that leads to another confrontation and Mark killing him again. So Randall shows up a lot. Now, if he's dead here, he's dead here, but there's always the chance that he doesn't drown, he gets out another way, has amnesia, comes back later. It's TV. They can still do that. Now, it looks to me that Steven was created. This is my theory time. Okay. It looks to me that Steven was created when Mark was being abused as a way to escape. Now, when Mark left home and didn't have to deal with his mother anymore, I think Steven shifted to the background and was basically gone for many years. Now, a different type of stress while in the army led Mark to create another personality, likely Jake, who is the fugue state he talks about during the episode where Mark went AWOL and got him to be discharged. So I think when it comes to killing in battle and stuff like that, Jake is the persona. Jake makes things happen. He does all the dirty work. He does all the things to make the other personas well. And when Steven comes back, he kind of takes up on doing that too. Now, Steven doesn't return until many years later when Mark's mother dies. When Mark can't handle the emotions that came with her passing, Steven returns. And that's why Steven seems very innocent and very honest and young. It's because he hasn't been growing with Mark. He's been in the background since he left home. So he's coming back in the world. He's talking to his mother, all of that stuff. That's why he seems a little childlike, because Steven hasn't been around. Now, most likely, it was all put together. So when Steven takes over, Mark kind of goes down and Steven takes over. It's probably Jake who does all those other things. The buying the new goldfish, setting up a date, getting him an apartment, and then killing the people that attacked them. Jake is probably the no-nonsense one. Okay, these people are trying to kill us. Let's kill them. Where, he's not worried about the stuff for Khonshu, getting information. He's just worried about solving the problem, whether it's buying a goldfish or taking a life. Now, what's going to happen next, I'm not really sure. They asked Tauret to get a message to Layla to free Khonshu, but can she? Can she get into the Great Pyramid? I mean, can she get in there and free him? That seems to be a long shot. So Mark is the ego, Steven is the superego, Jake is the id. Yeah, I could see that. Totally. Now, maybe Osiris sees what Ahmed is doing and goes, I was wrong, resurrects Mark. Maybe it's Hathor, who used to have a thing with Khonshu. Maybe she steps in. It seems like some god is going to have to step in and bring Mark back, or free Khonshu so that he can bring Mark back. And then when he comes back, will Steven come back too? See, I don't think getting rid of Steven works. I think they need to bring Steven back as well, because otherwise you're kind of curing Mark's DID. And I don't know if that's something you want to do in the show when it can't be done in real life. So I think that would be insulting to people with DID, and Marvel's trying to be very cautious about that. So I don't think that's going to happen. So I expect that Steven will come back with Mark. Now, I think the big mystery is how he comes back. And then after that, we should get a pretty straightforward story. So if it is like 42-minute episode, 45-minute episode, the big thing is going to be how he comes back. After that, I don't think there's a whole lot of big mysteries left. It's just about stopping Arrow and Ahmet. So I could see it being a shorter episode. Now, The big question, though, when we might see that third persona, will he, assuming it's Jake, play in the resurrection? Will he be a surprise reveal at the end? Like maybe a post-credit scene? We see Mark and Steven going back to their normal life, and maybe they go by to say hi to Crawley or whatever. And then we see him walk out and get into a cab, and we kind of pan in on the cabbie's license, and it says Jake Lockley. And that's our introduction. They end the series with that. I think that would be kind of an interesting way to do it. Now, they've been hinting at this persona all through the series. There's got to be some kind of payoff for that, even if it's just a throwaway like that at the ending. Because I really thought he was going to show up some point in this episode and be the balance for the scales, and they open the sarcophagus. But no, they've been stringing out Jake for a long time. Another possible end credit scene that I would like to see, I don't know if they would do it, but it would make a lot of sense, is if after everything is done, you have like Osiris's avatar, or, actually Osiris at some point, and you see them get killed by a shadowy figure, or one of the gods gets killed by a shadowy figure, and it's pretty obvious, maybe not showing them completely, but we see Gore the God Butcher, because this would be a great tease for Thor Love and Thunder, being that we've been dealing with the gods, and that's going to be with the gods. So I'm hoping out something like that. Jay says, do you see them getting a second season of Moon Knight, getting a movie? I think Moon Knight will end up in something, but there's been no talk about him getting a second season. They're listing it as a mini-series, not as a season one. Like, it's not being listed the same way as Loki. It's being listed like the other series that none of them are expected to get second seasons. So I don't know if they'll get a second season, but Kevin Feige and the team are currently at the retreat figuring out what the next 10 years are going to be. Maybe the response to Moon Knight will make them do a second season, but I don't know. My guess is no, that he'll show up in a movie. We'll get like a Midnight Suns thing, or he'll show up in the Avengers or Blade or something that way. But I would love to see more of Moon Knight. I'm loving this series. And Oscar Isaac is just hitting a home run. But so is Ethan Hawke and May Calamaway. It is a great show. JD says, my theory, Mark seems dead at the end. Wakes up, Mark, you're all right? Who's Mark? The name's Jake. Okay, I could totally see that too. That while the two of them are figuring all that out, Jake gets back in the body, gets him going. Yeah. It would be weird, but I could totally see that. All right, guys. Gonna have to end it there. We're out of time. We will be back next week with more shows. We will definitely talk about the season finale of Moon Knight. And anything else that comes up over the weekend, I'll figure out what the rest of the shows next week are going to be. Thanks for joining us. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons and stick around, because after this we have What's in the Box with Miss Jen, then Space Cadets, Nerdcular Warfare, horrible name for a show, and then Kicking It with Henri. That's our lineup for tonight. So stick around. We got a lot of great stuff. We will see you next week. Have a great one. Good night.
Thanks for tuning into The Experience. Help us out and hit subscribe over on YouTube and click the bell when you do. Need some help? Scan the QR code in the bottom corner.